Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the Pixel Classroom Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Reed, and we are back here for our actual second guest episode here. This will be episode 3 in the audio part, which will be live here on the audio part here for the podcast within about 2 weeks, actually, right now, too. And believe it or not, I got a guest. He was actually a good old friend of mine. He's actually the co-host of our Relived streaming cast, which is, of course, Games, Comics, and Coffee. We were just actually doing a little piece on it, talk about some things that we have hopefully set up for that, as well as hopefully maybe doing some things later on here for the Pixel Classroom Podcast. But if you haven't thought about hitting the subscribe button, please go ahead and do that right now. We have a thing. I've had a couple of people that pop up. But on that note, I'm going to bring in my guest for today. He is, like I said, the co-host of our Relived live stream series, Games, Comics, and Coffee. He is a long time owner. He is also part of the G3 podcast of himself. Also, he's a radio announcer. He is a big gamifier too. And you can find him on, of course, Instagram, Threads, and of course Twitch as Cyclops Muller. And speaking of which, let's bring him in. Welcome the one and only Adam Muller to the Pixel Classroom Podcast. Hello, Adam.
Hey, it's actually pronounced Muller.
It's Muller. See, one of these I messed it up all these days. See,
it's all right. Everybody does.
It's like when I had Josh on last night and everything else. I actually said his name right. He said, "You got it right." I thought, I don't know. I screwed up now the rest of the night. I just kept calling him Josh the whole time because I was able to say his Spanish middle name pretty simple because of my aunt. But sorry about that. But Adam, why don't those who don't know you have not checked out the Games, Comics, Coffee, because after our return episode Sunday, we hadn't been on in 9 years, believe it or not, as we found out. We found out we still own some of the clothes we still wear then, and the rest have gone to the pile. But who are you? What are you doing? And what is your little podcast on gamers all about?
I ask that same question all the time. Who am I? No, so actually, I started Gamers Got a Game G3 on Facebook. It actually started as a different name. It was called Games and More when I first started it. If you remember that, so excited.
I actually do remember Games and More. Yeah, I do remember that.
Yep, it was actually our friend Neodeath, Brian Hepner, who came up with the name Gamers Got a Game.
Rooster himself. That's right.
Mm-hmm. So we started that. It was actually me and another kid that I went to college with at Rasmussen College in Rockford, Illinois. He was really into games. I was really into games, but then we started it, and eventually he actually went off to the military. So, while he's doing very important things, it would kind of all fell on me. And he actually never really came back. But he's come back as a fan, but he's never really come back as a person that hosts anything. Started doing that, started posting a lot of things. I've gone through a slew of admins here and there, but eventually it became what it is now, which a lot of people are, I've talked to people out in the community and they're like, "Oh, I've heard of that page," and I never would have thought that. Eventually that actually kind of skewed off into a streamers page where exactly after I started doing Gamers Got a Game, I started streaming on Twitch, and later on I created a streaming page called Streamers Gotta Stream, so kind of a nice little tie-in with that. Started doing the gaming page on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it now. Started doing a lot of things on Instagram, and I've got a TikTok, and I hate to say it, I tend to forget that I have a TikTok.
I just have an account that was signed up, and I've never posted one thing. I think I watched it because I'm on Instagram or Threads. People post that on Reels, so it's like, oh, what, I don't need to worry about TikTok. I mean, it's just my students like, "Dr. Reed, you want to be a TikTok?" I'm like, no.
It's like, do I have a choice?
Exactly. That's what I say too. It's like, I am your teacher versus like, you want to be on a B reel? Like, oh, what's the reel today? I'm B reels. Like, we're going to do about how many professionals you can get a picture with. Like, okay, I can get behind that. All right, let's go. Let's take the picture. And then they go there and they see how many professionals they get to. It was kind of cool. We got our old superintendent. He just recently left for another district. He got on one of those B reels with the kids, and one of them were like, "Got the superintendent? How did you do that?" I think people forget that sometimes we like to have fun too, even when we're the head honchos of a school district.
Oh yeah, actually, when I was in high school, it was after I moved from Sycamore and I lived in Rochester for a little bit. We actually had a daily news, school news thing that would go on the TVs all over the school.
Oh yeah.
And I'm not sure how they did it, but there was these two kids, and I don't remember their actual names, but their stage names were Ben and Baki. And I'm not sure they would read like they would wish the happy birthday to all the kids whose birthday it was that day. And I'm not sure how they did it, but they actually got the local CBS news people to be on the actual show where they were actually
Whoa.
where they were actually doing a sketch where they ran into the news the news station, and they would run up and they actually like interrupted, quote unquote, interrupted the broadcast, and they were like, oh yeah, it was actually the news guys go like, oh yeah, you're looking for the birthdays, here, hold on. And then they handed it to them, and then they just went back like they were doing regular news, and we were all just like, how did you get the actual news people to go along with this?
I have to agree. I don't even hear that. And I've talked to the broadcast people at Sycamore. Katie Hertz, who we know thinks she's the vice principal and everything else too. But a lot of the Spartan in a Minute and a lot of other stuff, GK has based a lot of their stuff on. I didn't even hear about that. That's actually kind of shocking. I did not know how CBS did that. And it's funny, his name was Baki. Baki is actually a nickname when you're overtired.
Yeah.
We used to call Tyler, my son Tyler, when he was younger, like, oh, he's so Baki right now.
Oh, really? Nice. But yeah, I've always remembered that, like, just that they got the actual news people, because I was fairly new to the school, but at the same, because that's when I moved there. I actually moved there my sophomore year, or my junior year.
Yes.
So I was pretty new to the school. I was new to the whole thing, but I knew from the times when I had gone up there for all my medical stuff. If I was staying in the hotel room with my mom or something like that, there was, we'd always put on like the CBS news, and she was really not trying to see the actual news, but more see what the weather was going to be like, because that's back before cell phones existed.
Right. They weren't like the really good smartphones. Like, oh, hey, look, let's watch the streaming or whatever social media back then.
Yeah, so we were watching that to find out what the weather was going to be like, especially for like rides there, rides home, and so that's how I knew kind of who they were. And of course, sitting in that classroom, I was just, of course, I'm sitting there, the new kid, going like, "Holy crap!" So
yeah, like, how did that just happen? What?
Like, wow, this school's got connections, and then find out they never agreed to it to another person. I was like, what? So I bet one of them had a connection inside.
They would have that. It's like, we were talking just before the podcast, like some of the people I've reached out to. I mean, I've either been associated, they know of me through other things from the other, podcasts, either Spider-Man or some of my reviews I've done on YouTube here. So luckily, it's like there's some connection, and like when they agree to say, oh yeah, right, I'd like to be on there, and people are like, how did you get JMD Matthias or Ron Friends on the podcast? I'm like, I asked, and they said, well, I'd be happy to. And I was like, okay, cool. It's like a guest star we're not going to mention now, because we don't want to jinx it come November, but he's a very well-known writer and artist of a certain comic and everything. And I did just message him. He says, I'd love to do it. I'm free after the beginning of the year, but don't contact me until closer to Thanksgiving so we can commit to a time. I said, we got it. But it's interesting. And I got a hold of him because somebody had said, oh, did you ever contact so-and-so? And I said, well, he knows I'm there. And he posted some things on Instagram, and I know he's on YouTube once again for like an occasional. I know he was on the Superman homepage vidcast, which is the creators. They do a bunch of Superman stuff all week. I didn't even know they had a live stream until like this past summer. And they're like, oh yeah, we're going on 9 years. I'm like, I've been following your webpage since 98, but you actually have had something for 9 years. I never knew about.
Yeah. Yep.
So that kind of threw me. Oh man. And now this is a very interesting thing now, Adam. Now you're known as Cyclops. Now, why is it you are Cyclops? There's actually an interesting story, and there's actually a joke you had with the media at one point too, where you threw out a very famous Monsters Incorporated joke out there.
Oh yeah, that was actually again when I lived in Minnesota, when I went to John Marshall High School, actually, where I graduated there. That was actually very shortly after Monsters Inc. had come out, the very first one. And you remember Mike doing that whole thing, he had that giant eye in the middle.
Everybody.
So there was a joke that I did in the right on camera, where somebody, I don't remember the whole thing, but they were like, oh, didn't Adam do that? Yeah, it's Adam's fault. So I stepped in front of the camera on a live feed, and I was like, yeah, blame it on the little guy with his one eye. And I'm not even kidding. The door was shut and I could hear parts of the school laughing. All around.
They all got the joke.
Uh-huh. Like and as soon as we walked out, because the camera would cut, we'd be ready to go to the next class and everything. I walked out there and people were literally standing in the hallways, like just laughing, and I was like, "What? I don't know what you guys are talking about." That was the guy on TV, and I don't know, But no, for real, actually, I usually switch up the story a little bit when people ask what happened to my eye. My wife tends to get it a little bit on that. Where
I think Rachel has plenty of excuses for that one.
But I'll tell people, be like, yeah. So one day, all I said was, "Hey, you're getting a little gray up there," and the next thing I know is she came at me with something shiny, and then the doctor was asking me how many fingers am I holding up.
Wow.
So, yeah. She usually looks at me and like, "Are you kidding? You just did that again." But no, actuality though is I lost my left eye to cancer when I was 2 years old. My dad actually fought in the Vietnam War, and he drove the trucks that carried Agent Orange, which, as we know, has been linked to a lot of issues. Now, they can't actually say definitively that mine was a result of that, but the doctor's theory is that it didn't affect him, but it went into his bloodstream and got to me. Because the kind of cancer that I had was actually typically hereditary. But I don't know much about my dad's side of the family. I know a little bit, but not much. I know him, and then I never met my biological grandfather because apparently him and my grandma divorced, and he walked out long before I was ever born. And then I know a few people on her side, but I don't know much about his side. But from what I was told is I'm the first person in our family to ever get it. And the doctors have said, well, we don't know much about your dad's history, so this could be a sporadic tumor where it just pops up in your bloodline, like just you're the only one that ever gets it and then it never shows up again. Or if I were to have kids, it could be the first in the long line.
Right.
So,
yeah,
we don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing too. I mean, people know my mother went through breast cancer a few years ago, about 2017, 2018, long before, and then she was kind of considered remission just before COVID happened. And it was very interesting too. It was about the hereditary of cancer in my family, but breast cancer, it only showed up in maybe 3 other relatives on that side. And then my I should say not my dad's side, but my one uncle's wife, my aunt Stella, she got it. It was more common on her side to have breast. She went through, she survived and had no problems with it either. I think her sister also had an issue with it, but it wasn't as cases too. But it was one thing too. I mean, I've lost several relatives to cancer, but the problem is it's never been the same kind. It
Right.
is not been the same kind. And one person did have optical cancer. They had a developed tumor and everything. They were able to get it out, everything. He only lost about 40% of vision on his left eye, similar to you, but the only difference was like parenthal was gone, and it was like more of like tunnel vision, almost like people who have the albino light system where it's like this is your field of vision and that's as far as you're getting.
Yeah. With mine though, they actually there's been cancer on both sides. My aunt on my mom's side passed away from breast cancer, but I don't know of anybody on our side, on my mom's side, that's ever had it again. My grandmother on my dad's side had breast cancer. She was fine. It was almost like, just run around a chemo and boom, Yeah. My mom actually recently had cancer. She found out that she had lung cancer. She was a smoker for 30 years, but she hadn't smoked in 30 years. So
yeah, after all that time.
Yeah, so she had like a little bit of a cough, and she went to the doctor for something completely unrelated. And then he just said, well, I know, it's kind of rare that there'd ever be anything for cancer 30 years later. But let's just get a scan. And he actually, he didn't even tell her he was doing this, but he got like one of those real ultra scans where they can look at there and
the unit scanners.
Yeah. And they found 2 small lumps on her lung. And when they tested one, I think one came back benign, but the other came back cancerous. She basically had stage 0 cancer.
Oh, so
it was the very, very beginnings.
Yeah, it's very hard in cancer, or even intestinal cancer. If it's found that soon, is usually people barely do it, or they do one round and it's done. I mean, if it's caught like that, and here the doctor was like, I'm just going to be on the safe side and run it to be on the safe side.
Yeah, they took it. They actually took part of her lung out, and then they said that there was no signs of the cancer at all. They'll still check her, but they said there was no signs of it. They didn't even need to do a round of chemo. So
that's actually pretty amazing.
Mm-hmm. And I told her, I was just kind of joking, going like, so basically you got just enough cancer to wear the purple shirt for a Relay for Life, but not enough to actually say you're a survivor.
Right. Yeah, it's like I'll bring awareness and I'll fight because I've dealt with it, but no, I didn't have to say I was a survivor, as they
You
say.
did not suffer. You were like in the hospital for 3 days, and that was just to recover from being opened up. That was really so.
But in some cases, we all wish those who get those kind of scares do. I mean, I've had benign cysts removed from my areas and everything. Luckily, nothing's come back, and I keep an eye. And luckily, it's the same thing. And then I've had them, and I've had that too. And I had one recently checked just this past year, where nobody knows about this one. And they basically like, nope, this is just the old classic. That's an area that sadly you're rubbing. You clean it, luckily, but unfortunately, the pores get clogged, the pus fisses up, and you got a cyst. And it's like if it's really bad, we'll take it out. But they're like, you're fine. So I'm like, thank you for telling me that, because I do worry about that stuff, because I've had 4 removed in the last 10 years. So.
Well, if it gets bad enough, you could go to this one doctor called Dr. Pimple Popper that's on the Discovery Channel. I mean, if it's a cool enough thing, they'll actually pay for you to go out there and be videoed and everything else, and you get their accent
and everything.
Yep.
Good old Dr. Pimple Popper. Well, everybody, this is why this podcast is so interesting, especially when we're live feed versus the audio, because everybody's probably laughing audio like, what did I download this episode for? Like, like I'll go back to listen to them about Last Ronin they talked about there on the YouTube. Anyhow, so moving on to one of the big things that's always been with you, Adam, is you, like I said, you're a gamer, and we were talking, like I said earlier, besides our games, and we're classic. You're more of the gamer. I don't have the systems like you do. I mean, you have or anything else, but for you, getting into the games, what is it that's really drawn you towards games? And we'll kind of segue this way over to a little bit of the education we were talking about earlier with people, especially SEL and those who have been using things like Minecraft and Dungeons and Dragons for things. But what's kept that pull for you for games all these years? And what is it you're excited about? Because let's face it, there's some good games coming out in the next couple months here, especially for the different systems.
God, for October, it's so jam-packed. Actually, in fact, I just heard that the remake of Alone in the Dark got pushed to next year just to avoid October. Because
my brother, not my brother Robert, my brother Trevor heard that. And he seriously, he's like, I can't believe they moved it. He's kind of mad right now.
I'm glad they did, though. But I mean, have you seen how many games are coming out in October? I mean, you've got, I think we were talking about this during the other podcast.
Yes, we were.
Yeah, you got Spider-Man 2, Alan Wake 2, a game that I've waited over a decade for. You got Assassin's Creed Mirage, which is apparently going back to the way that Assassin's Creed was, being more of a action stealth instead of action RPG.
Which both my nephews love that game system. So trust me, I know they've probably reserved it already.
Yeah. And you got Super Mario Brothers Wonder coming out. You've got Hellboy coming out.
Amazing. My son Tyler is like really excited. I'm excited. Melissa saw it and went, ooh, that looks cool. I went, yeah, I know. I'm like, that's on the Christmas list. Hold on a second.
It does. Phil Spencer actually just released a note or a statement today saying that he played it and it's absolutely phenomenal. And I'm like, that's Xbox praising Nintendo.
When you have a rival company and a rival corporation say that's good, you've done something right. You seriously have done it, when both Xbox and Microsoft are both saying like, whoa, this is good. And I think this is possibly, if we're right, this is the last certain voice actor we might ever hear do Mario after this one.
Yep, Charles Martinet. I think this is his last one, or maybe the one before that was his last one. I'm not sure if it's going to be the same. But yeah, they have said that he's now going to be a Super Mario ambassador. And he actually just announced today he doesn't know what that is. So I'm like, I'm pretty sure that just means you're going to the conventions. You're going to be there as Mario. You can do the Mario voice for the fans, but you're not going to be sitting in that booth doing all that.
Autographs or thing like, yeah, give me your cartridge, or give me your big up pin doll, and I'll be more of that sign. Kind of like Kevin Eastman. Like, people will bring him like Funko Pops of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and he'll sign it. He'll just like, yeah, I didn't come up with this concept, but hey, you're a Turtles fan, I'll sign it. And same thing with people are, they'll sign it. That's what they do.
And you know what's actually really cool about that? Stan Lee would actually sign DC things.
Yes,
if you asked him to, which is like, okay, that's very unique, but that's awesome at the same time.
I think one, and this was before they did Stanley Imagines the DC Universe, which was a kind of a run in the early 2000s where he kind of did the concept for it. And some were cool. The Flash was really cool, but somebody had brought up one, and he said, "Could you do my Aquaman?" He's like, "Aquaman, I don't think I did him, but I'll sign him for you."
Yep.
Was his exact words and everything. And he said, and he even said too, was like, "And now I shall fight evil with my sharks." Was like what it was.
I saw a thing where Stan Lee actually, it was staged obviously, but you had like Batman and Spider-Man were like getting ready to fight in an audience, and Stan Lee actually ran up and like was holding them back, and he said something like, "Don't make me call your parent." Wait, something like that, and I was like, "Wow, that's dark, but that's funny."
That is funny, especially because Bob Kane wasn't around by that. But that is, "Don't make me call your parents." Wait, I have parents. Hold on a second. Wait, I have imagined Batman. I am your parent.
Exactly. No, but yeah. No, but
it's not bad. We get games, comics, and coffee, folks.
Oh yeah, we gotta schedule the next episode, and I don't know what I'm doing in October. At this point, October.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to flip a coin, and we're just gonna be like, "What's coming out in October? What is Adam playing? What is Ryan probably going to be playing next month?"
There's just one weekend that I can't because I'll be in Kansas City, but other than that, pretty much free.
Yeah, I just have to look here because of homecoming. I think once we get past homecoming week, there's not much else coming for me. And then we can, like I said, pick a Saturday and Sunday. See, guys, even on this podcast, we still discuss things that happen on other podcasts. I mean, yeah. People did that. Like, didn't you, when you had Elijah there on one of your last episodes, that you guys were talking like 4 different podcasts? Like, yes, we were. We're that bad. We're just like, what? Why do one? Let's do several. It's not like we make money out of this. We just do it because we love doing it. We have something to say.
Maybe we'll make money eventually, but right now it's just fun.
Yes, eventually we'll have a T-shirt saying, "Oh, did you drink your coffee and play your games today and read comics?" We're not there yet. We've talked about it, guys. We're not there. We need more subscribers. Like right here, I have a view of 3 people, and I have a view of 2 people. I have 5 people on Facebook, and then I got 1 on LinkedIn right now as we're doing this. I'm not editing this out either, but it's like, thank you for supporting and watching us. But I like the people who keep popping in and out on YouTube versus Facebook. Like, oh, let's watch, and then I'll throw it back. Oh, LinkedIn. I'm that guy on LinkedIn. I'm like, actually, I know who it is. And thank you, Joe. That's all I'm going to say. Thank you, Joe.
LinkedIn is awesome.
So props on that. Anyhow.
But back to your question though about what kind of got me into games, I actually was I was introduced to video games very young. There was actually one year when my family, I want to say it was like 1987, when my mom and my aunt, my aunts, my uncles, they all got all of us, or they each got their own families. A Nintendo Entertainment System. So that was kind of my introduction to games. So that's when I really first started playing Mario and Duck Hunt. And then my grandparents actually had the Atari 2600.
Yeah, which is what I had.
Yeah. So whenever I would go to my grandparents' house, if I was going to go in the other room, if they were watching me or whatever, I'd be playing on that joystick and everything. And yes, I played E.T. A lot of people are like, "Oh, did you ever play E.T.?" Yes, I did.
Here, my cousin showed me how to beat it, and then I went home and beat it. I was like, "Hey, I beat E.T. This game's so bad, but I beat it."
Yes, that game was so horrible, but it did.
And yet, Sword Quest never got its final one with Airworld, unfortunately. And George Perez and Marv Wolfman did the comics.
And yeah, so
sorry.
No problem. So I was always kind of hooked onto games ever since I was a young one. And then there was kids that lived around our block that all had Nintendo systems, and eventually I started getting more into the Sega, the Super Nintendo. I was kind of growing up as the consoles were growing up. So that's really what got me into it. And then what kept me in it was actually when I was a kid, with the eye and just being different. I'm neurodivergent. I don't know if you've ever known that. I have ADHD. There was some bad things that were going on. Extreme bullying. There was other things going on. There was a lot of abuse that had happened to me, just various kinds. And one of the mainstays that I always could turn to for outlets for like anger or frustration was I would turn to music, specifically rap music. I was a writer. I would actually write my own songs to the point where people actually got scared because my lyrics got to be so dark. And some of the stories that I was writing too were getting like a little out there. But my mom was one of them that kind of said, it's better he keeps it here than starts out there,
Right.
Yep. So, but what turned into what I really turned to was video games, especially like the more extreme violent ones. That's where I was getting out my aggression. That's where I was getting out, depression. That's where I was getting out anxiety. That's where, PTSD issues that were going on. That's where I was really aiming it at. So, even as I've gotten older, I've just always turned to games as a way of reducing stress, reducing anxiety, reducing depression. My wife will actually tell me, like, if she can tell that I'm inside my own head here, which is not exactly a safe place for me to be by myself sometimes. She'll a lot of times be like, all right, go into that room, turn on that game, and start shooting things. So that's really where a lot of mine has come from. I actually credit games with saving my life in some ways. So
yeah, I remember too when I would have a bad day. Like one thing is like I didn't like you had thing like outside like the classic Duck Hunt and everything, and I even remember Bloxes and the old Nintendo 6. Remember the old light gun cannon they had over that, which was the update for the Super Nintendo. But I really got into fighter games a lot, especially with Double Dragons and everything. And I really used that for frustration. It just felt, I know. And people are like, look, she's Ryan, you're a teacher and you're talking about beating people up to get out frustration. That's kind of a bad thing. But for some things, it was actually a good relief. But what really worked for me, believe it or not, was this is why I got into games like Tetris, because it was frustrating and you just loved it when the blocks blew up and you were just like, oh yeah, there I said, and then I kept getting more into that too. But it was quite an outlet for me as well too. But I was also into like board games. I like thinking strategy board games, and I was always pop culture, so Trivial and other things I've done too. But
right.
I mean, it was very similar to you. That's how I did. But I remember sometimes back at the old Walmart, the old location DeKalb, Adam and I were from there, but the old location DeKalb used to have the old classic game out there. So when you left or you were in a long line, send the kids back then to go play in the video games while you checked out, and they would play maybe quarter or two, and I play like Final Fight. I remember the old 3D game. What was it called? They were just talking about this the other day, and I forgot the name of the game. Tekken, yes, Tekken. I couldn't remember it. Tekken, and I'd be there and everything, but when I come out, like my mom would grab me and my grandparents, and they'd be like, "Oh, so you have fun?" Like, I feel great. I just feel great. I solved problems, and I made level 3 on 1 quarter this time. I'm getting there. I'm getting there. So
it's back when you had to like look straight up and have the thing right here. It's like now they wonder why we have back and neck problems since we were doing that as kids.
Yeah, that's why everybody talks about what people with phones, why all these younger people, like, not that we're there, but we've kind of learned, like, yes, lay back and do this. We found out that's actually better for you to do on the phone. But there are a lot of kids like, I'm going to look down, and all of a sudden they're going to be like 21 and be like, oh man, why does that hurt right there? I'm like,
this hump on your neck, which actually I got.
I've been pretty good. We're also talking about chiropractors today, guys, and physical therapy. It is needed. Get your insurance today. Anyhow.
Yeah, so I got into like a really dark area of my life where I actually, and I know we try to keep it more family friendly here, but I did try to end things at certain times, and there were times where I would actually have to just think of a reason not to do it, and a lot of times that reason not to do it was I was sitting there going like, you know what, I haven't seen the end of True Crime Streets of LA.
Oh, there you go.
I haven't seen the end of The Punisher. I have not seen the end of this game. That was back when Game Informer actually, the magazine was.
I remember Game Informer. I would pick some at the old Waldron Books once in a while when they were still around. See, now we're really hating ourselves, Adam, how old we are.
Yeah. So I would actually kind of pick the games that I was most excited for, and I was like, but if I do this, I won't see this game. So that's where video games have really helped me through a lot of struggles. And it wasn't just games. It was movies, it was music, it was, writing. And I credit my grandfather a lot for helping me through it too. I didn't have much of a father figure growing up with my own dad, he's still around, but he wasn't much of a father figure back then. But I had my grandfather who saw what was going on and actually said, I'm, kind of took me as his own son.
Right.
Knew that I needed some kind of guidance, so. And then paranormal stuff also, but mostly games.
Yeah, believe it or not, people don't know that Adam had his own ghost hunters at one point too. Then again, I worked at somebody at when my old job, he was in charge of the DeKalb ghost hunters. Now it was actually kind of cool little thing. They were actually looking at the actual haunted areas around the spot and actually some of the stories of that for ghost hunters. I gotta do that later. I gotta get some ghost hunter people on here. We just gotta talk about what education and like once, because some of them actually work in like breakouts and escape rooms now for education, which is kind of cool. And they set it up based on old mirrors, like the old legends, like Bloody Mary or the curse of the mummies, the actual Egyptian curses from King Tut and everything. And it's actually pretty cool. It's very it's very factual based. It's based on everything on that, and actually some of the stuff that happened as a result. But the King Tut one's fantastic, including what happened to the explorers, including the one where the one and his dog died at the same time, supposedly of the curse, and actually what that could have led to and everything else. So it's actually very educational. It's kind of cool. But at the same time, you're like, ooh, this is freaky.
Yeah.
This is like, forget conspiracy. This is scary. It's like, but yet it's fun. And yet I'm learning.
Yeah, I don't know if they do that in DeKalb anymore. I know the guy that was in charge of that, he doesn't do it anymore. And the last time I tried to mention it, he didn't want me to even talk about it. So I'm like, okay, apparently they had a bad falling out, but I know that there's got to be others.
Oh yeah, I think there's a couple of Rockford chapters here, but like I said, I'm not involved in that. And like, because we know, and I'm a busy guy. This is like my side stuff. This is what I do for fun. It's like and good stuff, and eventually I make lessons plans out of there. So there we go, guys. This is my side gig. I don't get paid, but I come up with great lesson plans. Thank you. No. And speaking of actually lesson plans here, you were just talking about somebody you're going to have for your guests, but it's actually kind of cool. And actually, some people I know who are watching this, I know Michael Matera has used this, but you might want to talk about what you just did with this One Gaming people here and who they are, and something people might want to check out.
Oh yeah, so there's a group that my wife's friend Terry actually works for. She actually works as a counselor, helping kids who have been abused or neglected in some way, kind of helping them open up. And one of the ways that they have started doing that, and I'm actually going to have her maybe on Games, Comics, and Coffee, and then also on my podcast with Gamers Got a Game G3, the podcast. I'm going to have her on there. But what they do is they actually use games like Dungeons and Dragons and Fortnite and especially Minecraft. They get kids playing, they get kids kind of engaged, and then kids are usually, if they're engaged in something, they're more willing to open up to you, talk about their feelings, talk about, what happened to them, talk about the abuse and different things that they went through. So I'm going to be having her on my podcast. I actually got to message her as soon as we're done here to find out like when is a good time for her. And I can hopefully I can get her boss to come on too, so we can get like even more in depth of what started this whole thing and, the science behind it.
Yeah, and I actually have a little thing I get for our viewers. You won't see this on the audio version. I was able to bring up one of so some people have talked to me about the EDU, and then this is a very interesting thing right here. Is actually shows the actual progress pathways of how they do some of this learning education. But this is actually one of the setup as a teacher, and they have the K8, and this is actually off the Microsoft Learn ability here too. But it actually deals with the key features and stuff and additionals, and it actually has some more of the educational craft. And one of their links is actually in there, so you actually can look at that for SEL and everything else. And it says right here about professional development pathways as well as emotional, and it kind of goes in, and I'll have that on the show notes for the audio, but that's a little something there I was looking up, and it's pretty cool and everything else. I've done some Minecraft EDU. I've unfortunately never been able to pull it off. I would have liked to do it, but sadly I have students that would rather just blow things up and destroy things and then play roadblocks and see who they are, or play NBA Jam blocks. And unfortunately, as much as I'd like to, it's just because that's what they want to do. They don't want to make it educational. It's just have fun or just mess with people that are in their study halls. So unfortunately, it's never come. I would like to maybe someday, but right now it is because I've talked about doing AP computer science, and I would like to set up like a miniature Minecraft that's really good for world building as part of the AP test for computer science. So it's actually very thing. So any AP teachers, accelerated placement, definitely go into these things because these are good. And what Adam's talking about here is very relevant to that education and teaching.
Yeah. When they told me that they were doing this, I honestly was like, I've always thought that it could be used because I've used it as my own therapy, honestly, but I thought it was like almost a self-therapy thing. I didn't know that actual therapists or counselors or, people in the psychology field could use this in a certain way. It makes sense. Honestly, you hear it and it's like kind of like, wait, okay. Yeah, it makes, once I heard it. Actually, if you've I don't know if you ever read this book, but it was back when we both used to work at Borders. There's a author, James Paul G. He actually wrote a book called What Video Games Can Teach Us About Learning and Literacy. I don't know if they're on like the first edition, second edition, if he's even still doing editions anymore, but that was a book that I read way back when.
He's got some stuff on. I'm trying to think. My computer is being a little weird here right now too, but I'm trying to bring up one of the literacy because I found his literacy and discourse in his discourse piece because he's done a couple of things on that, introductions and stuff here. We got James Paul G. I'm only finding his one little area. Yeah, I don't think I have one of his other books on here. There it is, literacy, education, and pieces here. I think it's right here, and I'll share that with people who are watching. There we go. I finally got it up. So let me just switch that over for the share screen. People on audio, I'll leave a note on this on the podcast. There's one of his first ones. It's on first edition, though. 2015 was actually, that's an updated version of his literacy and education, which I know deals with some of the education in that. So that is up there. 43 paperback. It's not bad. That's like a whole curriculum, though. That's a whole curriculum, though. That's not the that's not just like a read it and be done with it or bookmark
right.
it.
Right. But yeah, there is that one. It's actually called What Video Games Have to Teach Us About Learning and Literacy. I think the newest one for that is the second edition. That was 2007. So maybe a little outdated now, but still there's a lot of relevant information.
Yeah, I have right here with a book preview through Google Books here. I'll switch it over really quick here. So I'll share that tab. This is how good I'm getting. There's just one little piece on there. So what video games have literacy right there, revised and updated edition. So that's the most recent updated version. John Paul McGee, James Paul McGee. It is copyrighted. 2003 was the last edition. So that was like third edition apparently. So that's what that one is right there. So it's definitely for some people to look at it. It's very good. And he has a revise about that. It's a very good educational book. I know Michael Matera has read this book as well as some other teachers that I've talked to. So I have not picked it up. I am actually stuck on what is called What Those Numbers Don't Mean and What Those Numbers Do Mean, which is my upcoming things. And people are like, oh no, he's doing other instructional things. Ryan, you and your books. I always get haggled about how many educational books I read now too, but I'm like, but I read fiction too once in a while. That's not what I used to. So but those are good books. And like I said, James Paul McGee is actually a pretty good writer and educator. It's definitely something to check out for anybody that's interested in that. I know probably a certain somebody on LinkedIn is probably going, ooh, I should order that book. I should go to Thrift Books and get it for $15. I'm not sponsored by Thrift Books, guys. I just like them.
Wait, are they out by you? Thrift Books, I've never heard of them.
No, Thrift Books is out of Minnesota.
Okay.
They are a website. They're great. I found a lot of good stuff on them, like brand new additional copies of books or like other ones like for cheap. But like I said, if it's going to cost me the same amount of money, I got to go to the bookstore on or Amazon then I'll just buy buy a new copy versus like, oh, this has barely been touched and it's $2. You got me. Instead of 30. All right, we're talking. Anyhow.
There you go.
Remember, guys, thriftbooks.com. Not sponsored.
Yeah, we got to definitely put that. Not sponsored yet.
Maybe soon. Just like I'm buying graphics, so maybe we'll get a little bit more so I can get the really super premium features on StreamYard. It'll really look professional. I'll get like Brad and Zach. All right, no, I'm not there yet. Anywho, as we see, guys, this is how bad Adam and I. If you come see Games, Comics, and Coffee, this is how bad off track we get. People say I get off track. No, Adam and I get off track all the time.
It's what I do.
It's just what we do.
Pretty much, I don't even know that there is a track. I
was about to say, wait, did we ever have a track? I don't know about it. I've had a track. People don't believe this. I do have a track, and then some people are like, "Oh, Brian, I know you don't have a track. You'll go on a tangent, and somehow it'll magically jump back onto where we were." I'm like, yeah, that's true. So I'm wearing the Star Trek shirt today. He's wearing his Boba Fett. For those on video here, you can see us. We're doing our Star Trek Star Wars salute here without the war.
Right. Star Trek, Star Wars, I say they're two sides of the same geek coin. One is more science fiction. The other is more science fantasy.
Actually, I think that's the best way to say it, is science fiction versus science fantasy. That's a good one. That's pretty good.
Well, and if you think about it, who was it? George Lucas actually said that he was inspired to do Star Trek by watching, or to do Star Wars by watching the original Star Trek TV shows. It kind of inspired him a little bit, but then they actually said that it wasn't like Fox never even considered doing a Star Trek movie until Star Wars took off at the box office.
Right.
And so I'm like, boom.
And that's actually what led to the Black Hole coming out too by Disney, because all of a sudden Disney saw this going on with Star Wars, like, oh, we need to get our own kind of space opera adventure, and the Black Hole came out, which I still love the Black Hole today. We actually watched it on Disney Plus last year. My wife had seen it many moons ago, and there's just some things that are still great about that. But I mean, I still love the robots, Vincent and Bob, and of course Maximilian. I mean, it's like you want to see the original evil robot? No. Go to Maximilian. Maximilian is the original. See, this is Disney because Disney owns them all now. But he's the original evil robot, and still to this day, even with those practical effects, you're just like, when he comes into that room, you're just like, oh, it's like big evil giant red robot with blades and lasers is coming at me.
Mm-hmm. Wasn't the robot devil in Futurama actually very heavily inspired by him?
Yeah, it was. Matt Groening even said that was where he got the inspiration for it, was based off Maximilian too. And I'd have to look on either wiki or the old one of the black hole wikis that actually give kind of what led to the design for Maximilian. Because for Vincent and Bob they were going for a little of like old Tomorrow World with a little bit of R2D2, but they just wanted to give more features versus C-3PO and R2D2, because R2D2 was one thing, but here they wanted to have actually personalities that were a little bit of the two, but they were actually their own people, which is good. If you look at it, Vincent, and people don't know the Black Hole, Vincent, who's the main robot in the black hole, is he's very sarcastic, but at the same time he's very down to kind of that family mentor. It's like, I'll have your back, don't get on my bad side.
Yeah. Kind of like Bender.
Yeah, exactly. He just turned 55. I found out the voice actor, James DeMago, he just turned 55. I was like, really? He's only 55. He's only 10 years older than me. I was kind of surprised that he's that much younger. Somewhere he's watching this saying, what do you mean? What? Right, my shiny metal? Anyhow.
Yeah.
I was the voice of Brother Blood too, Ryan. Shush, you comic fan. Mm-hmm. Anywho, so yeah, I mean, you got the little thing. I mean, you've definitely given your experience about how games helped you with there. We actually, have the areas too with about ones that have worked that for SEL, and like we said, we talk about JPG and everything else too. But going forward too, it's very thin, because we know we have the Oculuses, we have the VR, and VR has kind of been back into the forefront the last couple of years. And I think there's a place for it. But how are you seeing that with games actually themselves, both in personal and also in video and in education? You think where VR is kind of working with and AR are working now with games?
I haven't worked a whole lot with VR, just personally, but I do see it actually, if you actually see how much more interactive it is for VR, even if you're doing the horror games, you actually see how more interactive it is. I honestly think that is more kind of accurate for how people are now learning to take what they can visualize in these games and then put that into like actual structures. It's actually where the building blocks, where you're learning about how to build, like, people are learning how to build skyscrapers or buildings more efficiently, and it's because they're in 3D actually able to feel how this should work, instead of just, these are great, but they're actually able to feel, okay, so this would have to move here. What if this goes wrong? They can actually kind of see it in real time.
I'm actually a real person. So if there was a person, there's 5 of me in this room, is it meeting the dimensions that this room can hold? You know how they always say, like, the capacity should be 300 people, don't excel 310. And the reason they say that is because people can't escape the room in case there's a fire or something.
Right. So, and you can actually see how that would be in real time. If you're just playing it like this and you're like, okay, yep, good. Okay, I get the gist of the idea, but if you're actually in it and you're in a safe area with the VR, I honestly think that it's a better teaching tool. So then, of course, when you put in these horror games, you put in all these other games, and you start kind of learning how to navigate it, looking around. Honestly, I think it's just I think it does have a place. I don't know if it's going to be really a mainstay of the gaming industry. I would not be surprised either way, which way that it goes.
Right. And like I said, I have plenty of friends and teachers have used it in classrooms. I've also had my own Oculus, which we've done. We don't do a thing, but we really like the maze and some of the music. And I have a former student, he gets into it with the whole music thing, but he also knows because he says I can interact with it better. Like I'm really playing the drums. Like he's like, I know when to hit those beats exactly versus like the old, Guitar Hero games where like if you didn't hit it on that beat, you didn't get your points, back in the late 90s or 2000s when the Guitar Hero was a very popular game. That's what I said too. It felt like we got away from like the punch ups, the shoot up games, or the adventure games like Zelda, and we got into this very interactive time. Like the Guitar Hero was a huge one. What was another one that was like very interactive? I can't.
Pretty much anything on the Wii, like Wii Sports.
Yeah, we was smart. Nintendo was smart with it and actually got the interactive controller with it. That was the difference. The only thing is, they actually still did old school, but it was interesting how they moved to that because then they did it. Because like I said, I can react to it better. Like you said, you can see you actually are in the room, like you really are in this, whatever office, whatever thing, or I'm actually piloting. This is actually what a pilot sees, like the old simulator games of the early 80s and 70s, where it's like, oh, I'm piloting this game over Chicago, and this is kind of like the control. This is my attitude. This is how much fuel I have. Now it's like, no, this is like I'm really doing. I do know former students of mine who've gotten their aviation license. They put them in a VR system too, where it's like they really are piloting the plane, and then they go up with the instructor to, get their hours and learn themselves.
That's how a friend of mine is actually learning to get his pilot's license. He plays Flight Simulator, and he's actually got like the whole thing, it's on his computer, but he's actually got it where like the controls are down here, just like it would be a real. He said you can do it with an Xbox controller, but he's like it's just like he's got his all set up just like a real place or a real plane, specifically because he wants to know what it would be like. Now he's actually on his way to getting his actual license, and he said that the instructor likes that he went through and did this so that he didn't have to teach him like basically from ground zero. He had to start from ground one, but not from ground zero,
Yeah, and I remember when games started to be more common, like with Formula One races, they actually would recreate the tracks, and the race drivers would actually race the track on a computer or game system just to get used to the turn. So then when they were on the track practicing before the actual races, it wasn't like, and they found out that cut down a lot on accidents, as well as when people knew like, oh, I don't want to try to pass him up here, got that big turn, but once he comes straight, I got that hole, I'm going to jet across because they knew that was coming. It was easier than just going around the course for 4 hours. Like, well, your time's up. We got 6 other racers that need to run the track versus no, you're on the VR, you're on the game system. You actually can see it. And now they said they have it where like NASCAR does have the VR. So it's like they really are in the car. And see the POV versus like, well, yeah, the video game, it looks like I'm like the old pole position game, but the VR is like, no, it really looks like me, what I see when I'm looking out of my helmet.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and they've who was that? Can't even think of who I was thinking about here. Again, ADHD brain.
Especially us. I mean, by the time we're recording this, it's almost 8:30. We're not really quite on bedtime, but we're kind of like this later in the evening. We've kind of checked out for the night. So I like do my podcast earlier because then it's like we still can think straight.
I spend my days, actually, my job is actually on the other side of this wall where I sit and answer calls all day. So but half the time I'm fried by the end of the day.
Yeah, see, this is the one thing why we say, screen break time is a good thing for us in this day. Or it's especially if we work at home and do the calls, it's like I don't want to look. People would always say that too, who used to do like call centers or counseling where there was no computer. Maybe it was like a little dial up for your clients, but otherwise it just went through the phone. But they said, I want to do something where I'm not staring at a wall for another 6 hours. So I'm going to go outside, or you know what, screw that, I'm going to watch the football game. I want to watch a TV screen that actually has something doing it versus I've been staring at a wall for 9 hours. So that's why we do the audio.
Well, see, that's why people always ask me, like, how can I sit at that computer all day and then come in here into this room and stream on Twitch for 3 hours a night? And I'm like, because there's fun stuff on this screen. The other screen is just click, click, click. Okay, ma'am, the reason that this didn't get taken care of,
Well, and that's what I think what people don't understand is it is good for break time, but there's also a switch of things, like no pun intended there, a switch, Nintendo anyhow. But how it is where you go from one to the other, because it's like, I'm with it. I do interact with the kids. We're on screen, we're off the screens and stuff, and then I leave, and then I'll check my stuff on my phone for a little while, then I'll go outside. But my wife and I will then, or our son and I will watch some shows. But the difference is, but we're doing different things. Now we're kind of the interactive, like the old days, like people would do something, they would sit home and watch their favorite TV show, and then they would do X, Y, and Z. And then, I'm going to go see if I can beat the water temple in Ocarina of Time. So I'm going back to my room, and we all know how tempting that temple was.
Yes.
A bunch of people are right now screaming. I was there, Ryan. I remember it. The water temples have been notorious for Zelda levels since the beginning, and they don't show any signs of not. They said this last one with no, I'm not, but with the one recent Zelda game, they said this is probably the easiest water temple in many a year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I almost feel like we should start a support group for people who have gone through the water temple in the Zelda games.
I remember when they did Donkey Kong Country for the N64, and they did their own water temple, and I was just like, you hate us. Why do you hate
Why are you you want me to buy your product? Why are you torturing me?
You made me get the game with the expansion pack, and now you're making me go through another water temple. And then there was that cuckoo clock. People who played that game will know exactly what I'm talking about with that clock.
Yes.
I've got a bunch of Gen Xers and millennials that are just screaming like, "This is why we listen to you, Ryan and Adam. You're bringing back our memories and pain, and we made it through."
Yeah, but that's the thing. You got to say, "We made it. We made it. We made it."
We survived Battletoads. We survived the water temple.
I didn't survive Battletoads. I almost broke the controller how many different times with that one.
People know that Adam was not a Battletoads survivor. I was a Battletoads survivor, but let's just say Blockbuster Video back in the day almost did not get their game back. That's all I'm going to say.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if I ever got past the race car or the street. You remember? God, what is that? Yeah,
the lava ramp one.
Yeah, I don't know if I ever made it past that. Maybe I did, but
when I finally got it, and then I knew, and I talked to some teacher friends of mine because they played. It's like, well, I was fine with that. It was when we did the suction cup car with the ball falling. It's like, oh, that was like the second worst level because it really, you needed to know those turns. And our buddy You Can Beat Games, Kylo, there, when he was doing it on his channel, he did the game 2 years ago, and he did beating the game. But he was saying during that entire thing, but they always ask him like, oh, how many hours do you actually play? He's like, well, I might put it down to a certain amount of video, but he's like, you're talking about 3-4 hours of this turned into an hour or two thing. Like he had to do the original Final Fantasy. It was 3 parts, and all those videos were 3 hours.
Right.
Which tells you how long that game is.
Yeah, I think the game was actually only like 45 minutes long. The game itself, if you actually did it without dying.
Yeah, if you did it without dying, it's like 45 minutes. It's like the Home Alone 2 game on Super Nintendo. An hour after you bought it, you want to return it to the store.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, this has been a fun time. So, Adam, we got a lot of, we'll be talking about stuff, and people who don't know, Adam and I will be back with Games, Coffee, and Comics. We try to do it monthly, and we'll try to do some fun stuff and get some guests on there too. So this is a thing. It was a little fun thing we thought we'd do for the podcast, get some stuff. Adam talk about himself as well as games, education, a few other things. But, Adam, what do you got coming up? Speaking of the old, games for gamers and your upcoming Twitch feed here in the next month. Because like you said, October is going to be a big month for you.
Oh, yeah. Well, right now I've been revisiting some of the older classics with the Grand Theft Auto Definitive Edition. It's not as good as the original ones. I don't know if you've been hearing, but it's like the rumors about it, not handling well. They're true, but the story is still there, and it's got the nostalgic fun. But just know if it's your first time ever playing it, you might want to stick with the newer ones.
Yeah, and as somebody who has students that talk about it and say, yeah, I was there for the original Grand Theft 1 through 3, but yeah, they themselves say like, yeah, this isn't what my dad told me, or this isn't what my older brother said it was. I'm like, I haven't played in a long ways, guys. And I said, Dr. Reed's got a good friend, Mr. Muller, who would probably, go on his Twitch feed. He's there. He'll probably give you some very honest feedback on those games.
Oh yeah. So I've been playing that. I actually do have a couple others here that I might start. I was looking at doing the new 2023 version of Layers of Fear. It's actually a remake of a game that just came out in like 2018, which is weird to remake it that quick. But
yeah, and people make fun of Hollywood all the time about remaking movies, and here some of these games like, oh yeah, we just had that 2 hours. Let's redo the game.
Yeah. So, and I'm looking forward to that one. I've got a couple of indie games that are coming up, and then I'll probably be doing something like Death Stranding, the director's cut, which is something I never actually played. But especially for October, you and I were talking about this. There are so many games coming out in October. I don't know which ones I'm going to get to and which ones are going to be placed on the back burner, but I will eventually get to all of them. You've got Hellboy coming out. You've got Super Mario Brothers Wonder coming out.
Yeah,
Which
I know will be happening in my house. That Wonder is already. I mean, when Melissa wants it, you got a game there for the family.
Yeah. There's actually a story just about that in just a minute here, but you've got those coming out, and then you've got the big three that I'm calling them. You've got Assassin's Creed Mirage coming out, you've got Spider-Man 2 coming out, and then a game that people have been waiting for over a decade for. You've got Alan Wake 2 coming out.
Yeah, and I can tell you, both my brothers have been waiting for that game, as well as my nephew. My oldest nephew is 27. He's been waiting for that sequel since he graduated high school. So that tells you how long it has been, because he just turned 27, and he's been waiting for that since he graduated high school, and he's done with college now.
It's been 13 years, and I'm like, I don't think it should have taken that long, but apparently it was a big rights issue, because the original Alan Wake started as an Xbox 360 exclusive. So, and then of course, Remedy got the rights back to it finally, and that's why we were able to get Alan Wake remastered. And then that did really well on the PlayStation, and that's when they decided to come out and do Alan Wake 2. Apparently, it was a story they'd always wanted to do, but Xbox wasn't rushing to make it.
Right? They knew it was going to come. I think they wanted to wait until all the creators were happy, all the lawyers were happy, and they were like, we can make a good game again and we can make money without people saying no. We want our money back, or you use that without us. So at least it's been settled. And I mean, especially with things with these days with games.
Well, the weird thing is actually Alan Wake, the first one, didn't sell well to begin with. And that's because they literally launched that game, which was a new IP, up against Red Dead Redemption, the first Red Dead Redemption, which was technically a sequel to Red Dead Revolver. And I was like, yeah, but you're launching a Xbox 360 exclusive up against a Rockstar giant that's got, at that time was Xbox 360 and PS3.
Right. They were the big boys on the market at that point.
Right. So of course it didn't sell well, but it was actually word of mouth got it to get to those sales numbers where it wanted to be, and it became a cult classic. And there's not really one time where people did these top 10 lists about underrated games that game didn't show up on. So eventually we've got what we're going for now.
Right. So yeah, but yeah, I mean, it's some good stuff coming up here for a lot of people.
And what I was telling you earlier here about Super Mario Brothers Wonder is actually Phil Spencer just actually praised the game. Mm-hmm. It's like your competition was praising the game, but the weird thing is today, I don't know if you know her, but her name is Alana Pierce. She's actually a writer in the gaming industry. She wrote for God of War Ragnarok.
Oh, okay. I thought the name sounded familiar.
Yeah, she's actually been in the industry for a long time. People are ripping on her because she works exclusively for Sony, and she was actually on her own stream. I think she's on Twitch. She was on her own thing playing Starfield and talking about how great that game was. And people are saying like she's kind of turning her back, or she's thumbing her nose at Sony, at her employer, by doing this. And I'm like, doesn't Phil Spencer like regularly praise other games?
Yeah.
Why is it different for her?
Yeah, I don't get that at all too. There's probably a whole little thing. We're not going to get into that on this podcast or anything else too. But yeah, it's a good point. I mean, it's always a good. I mean, it's always like I said, a good thing when your competition or other people actually do praise it. Maybe you did do something right, versus like, well, this is okay, but nothing we haven't seen before, blah, 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 and so forth. But yeah, I mean, Wonder is getting quite the positive feedback. I mean, I think the power-ups have been the character unlocks too. And it's actually the very first true new Mario Brothers adventure since New Super Mario Brothers U came out. So the fact that we've waited, 12 years now since that, was hard to believe that one had stopped 12 years ago to get this new one. And right now it's great. We got the power-ups, we have the characters people want.
Mm-hmm.
Got a story.
Side scroller.
You got a side scroller, it got a story, and we're probably we're gonna have these classic characters and villains to the point where it's like, doesn't matter if you've loved the classics or not, or you loved Odyssey or love Luigi's Mansion, you got something there for everyone, and everybody's like excited, which is what you really want for a game.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, not even just Super Mario Brothers, but I mean, almost everybody seems to be excited for Spider-Man. I have not seen one person actually sit there and go like, you know what, it doesn't look good. It's like, You got Mario Brothers and Spider-Man coming out. I'm almost looking around going like, what year is this?
my son even said, he was like, Dad, we gotta get a PS5. Like, why? So I have 2 game systems, and then we can get Spider-Man 2, and then we can get Last Ronin when it comes out, and then we'll get new Super Mario Bros. I'm like, you make a good argument, Tyler.
But at the same time, maybe in about a year or 2, he might be asking for an Xbox because Wonder Woman and Indiana Jones are going to be Xbox.
I can see Indiana Jones. So, he likes Wonder Woman, but I could see him doing it. He's gotten an Indiana Jones with the last movie and everything. And he even got the Lego sets. He was putting together the Secret Temple from Raiders of the Lost Ark just last month. So he's kind of gotten it, which I'm like, that's my son. That's my boy. That's my boy. That's right. We're going to do it. A little Spielberg. Lucas, we got it. We got it. Yo.
So is a camera in his Christmas future?
He wants to start doing some things and everything. I'm going to wait until he turns 13 to really start worrying about his own channel and everything for various reasons. But if he can put it up to, I wouldn't mind him doing it. It's just he's got to get a focus on what he really wants to go with. And I mean, I've seen 9-year-olds who had a YouTube channel on how to build a good fort, and it was actually enjoyable. And they had like 400 subscribers of a 10-year-old building this fort. And then he turned 12. I was like, I don't want to do forts anymore. But now I'm going to talk about my Lego sets and how to build Legos. And everybody's like, oh yeah. And then all of a sudden be like 1,000 subscribers. And then he's like, he's 15. He's like, well, now I'll do Roblox. Hey, Roblox. Hey, we're up for that. At least he kept adapting as he got enjoyable on it.
Right.
So versus like, you do that and then all of a sudden disappears for, 8 years. And it's like, well, I have a YouTube channel. I haven't posted in like 6 years because I was 11, whatever. My mom bothered me. Now I can drive. And it's like, well, I could do it, but
Seems like a lot of teenagers now aren't even that excited about driving.
Yeah, I have a lot. Yeah, I have a lot of kids that are just like, I'm getting my license, but I don't have a car. But I don't need to drive. And some people are like, well, you want to pay Uber all the time? It's like, where do I go? People are like, I got this at home now. As they say now, it really is, friend with the friends with pizza. But it's like same time, a lot of people get on like this, like I'm gonna get my Xbox and we're gonna play Fortnite or we're gonna do X, Y, and Z. We're gonna play the new Spider-Man game, and I'm gonna eat from my home and I'm gonna grab 2 pizzas from Casey's and what's up, and I'll be on FaceTime. Let's just do a grit chat. I mean, it's become that. It really is.
Which is weird because you and I were like 11 going like, I can't wait to drive, and now it's like 16-year-olds going like, oh, cool. Mom, can I borrow the car for 5 minutes to go to McDonald's?
Yeah, pretty much. And I'm gonna order the app so I can just park in the parking spot and they can bring it to me. But we're all good. And look, free Sprite.
And actually, Pepsi's giving away things for free right now. Not sponsored.
No, we're not going to get into that with Pepsi right now. There's a little something else I'm not going to do at the time. This is filmed in September. That's all I'm going to say, and people can Google search that. Anyhow,
you can edit that out, right?
And we're not sponsored by Nintendo, Xbox, Sony, Microsoft.
I'm sponsored by my job, but it's not actually sponsored. They just pay me to do the job. And then I do this.
Yep. And mine encourages me, but then at the same time, they're like, don't do anything you'll regret later. That's why I teach digital literacy, everybody in the state of Illinois.
That's why I'm kind of glad that these cameras weren't around when I was a kid, because I did so much stupid stuff and there's no record of it anywhere. So it didn't happen.
That's one thing we've always said. One thing kids today will never like the fact that you could actually disappear and your digital footprint was not as discoverable as you thought it was back then.
Mm-hmm. We were on our bikes and it was like, did your parents know how far out you went? No, just as long as I was home for dinner. They didn't care.
Well, when the street lights came on, I was home in the driveway. Life was good.
Mm-hmm.
There we go. That's right, folks. We're old.
I'll be 40 in a few months. So
that's even more shock. I'm going to be 46 next in 5 months. Anyhow. Okay. Okay, everybody. I hope everybody's good. Hopefully, go ahead, check out Adam's wonderful stuff, and he'll be back for more. Check us out on the YouTube channel here. Those are our audio subscribers. Thank you for checking us out here. It's been a wonderful time, and I hope to join us all next time on the Pixel Classroom Podcast. Bye.
Bye, everybody.